For this, you will need page 308 from chapter 18, which is the assignment of what you read from Teaching by Principles by H. Douglas Brown. All right, so first let's start with what are micro skills and macro skills. And I think there's a very easy comparison. So micro skills and macro skills is what you use to become a good listener. It's the things that you can do to become a good listener, to become a good reader. There's micro skills and macro skills for listening, and there's micro skills and macro skills for reading. So these are the little things that you do as a good reader and as a good listener to be able to extract meaning, to be able to understand, to use schema, all these things. Think about what makes you a good listener, right? The little things that you do. But let's not talk about listening right now. Let's talk about cooking. Are you a good cook? In order to be a good cook, what are all the things that you need to be a good cook? So let's think about those. Cooking is not just cooking. There's a whole bunch of things, little things that you need to know how to do in order to be a very good cook. And very simple things, like for example, you need to know how to chop. You need to know how to slice. When to put the oil on the pan. You need to know all these little details that are not necessarily cooking, but a good cook knows all these things. How much salt you should use. But using salt is not cooking. No, but in order to be able to prepare a good meal, you have to be able to know how to salt food, right? So it's all these micro skills that you have to manage as a cook that make you a good cook, what really matters within the kitchen. So micro skills to cooking are all these things. So when we think about listening now, it's all these little things that you do in order to be able to be a good listener. It's these little steps that you take and these little skills that you need to apply given the circumstances of what you're listening to or what you're reading. All right, so what we're going to do today is we're going to do some exercises so that you guys can practice some micro skills. So you're going to need a piece of paper, somewhere to write on, and I'm going to give you one listening exercise, and you're going to listen through the exercise and do the exercise. Then at the end of that exercise, you have to decide from the list of micro and macro skills from page 308, which micro skill or which macro skill you practice. Now, someone's going to ask me, what's the difference between micro and macro? That's in the book. And the difference is micro is bottom up and macro is top down. But what you're going to do is with page 308, after you've done the activity, you have to decide from the list which one we just practiced. And at the end, I'm going to give you the answers. So you need to keep track of activity number 1, use this micro skill. Activity number 2, use this macro skill. Activity number 3, and then at the end, I'll give you the answers for those. All right, you guys ready? Let's go to activity number 1. I'm going to play a conversation, and all you guys need to do is replace the responses from the second speaker with words. All right? Bear in mind, this is not a listening lesson. These are just specific listening instances where we are practicing micro skills. All right, we'll talk about incorporating these into lessons later. But right now, all we need to do is listen to the conversation and then replace the responses from the second speaker with words. So here we go.
Hey, John.
Hey.
What are you doing tonight?
Oh.
Would you like to do something? How about we go to a club? How about a steak dinner? Is 7 good for you? So we're set.
All right.
Okay, so that was the first conversation. And the responses, like for example, at the end, he said, all right, right? So how about a steak dinner? That was just an utterance, right? So it was just, what did that mean? That meant, I like that idea or something like that, right? So that was what you were supposed to do. Now think about what you're doing here as a micro skill. What micro skill from the list you're using? You might want to pause the video, write it down, because we're going on to the next activity right now. Next activity, number 2. I'm going to read a passage, and all you guys need to do is to write the verbs. So are you guys ready to write the verbs down? All right, I'm gonna read a passage from a poem. You guys ready? "'Twas brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the borogroves, and the mome rats outgrabe." Now I'm gonna pause here and I'm gonna let you know that I'm not having a stroke. Those are actual words. I'm just reading from the Jabberwocky by Lewis Carroll. All right, I'm gonna continue reading and I'm gonna show you the poem later so you can see that those are actual words. Keep writing the verbs. I'm continuing. "Beware the Jabberwock, my son, the jaws that bite, the claws that catch. Beware the Jubjub bird, and shun the frumious Bandersnatch. He took his Vorpal's sword in hand, long time the man some foe he sought. So rested he by the Tumtum tree, and stood a while in thought. And as in uffish thought he stood, the Jabberwock, with eyes of flame, came whiffling through the tulgey wood, and burbled as it came." I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to show you the whole poem. I just did half, and I've bolded the verbs that you are supposed to write down. Okay, so after looking at that, let's get back. So think about which of the list of micro and macro skills you used and write down the number of which micro skill we used for exercise number 2. All right, if you need to think about it, pause the video because we're moving on to exercise number 3. I'm gonna play a story. All you guys need to do is answer the following question. Where was a person when the story happened? Who came down to talk to them? What part of the house they were in? Describe the accident. Why did the accident happen? How did they feel as they watched the news?
I was at home, I mean at a friend's house, and we were talking or playing video games really, when suddenly his father came down to the living room, the basement, it's not important. He came down to the basement and told us there had been an accident on the news. He said that a car had crashed into a building, a house, that's it, which was nearby. So we went upstairs to see the rest of the story. It was an idiot who was on drugs. Oh, no. He was drunk. We all sat there, amazed. Well, more like dumbfounded, seeing how dangerous stupid people can be.
Okay, that was pretty simple, right? Now think about which of the micro or macro skills you used for this one. I think you understand that maybe the actual exercise itself is not as important as figuring out what micro skill and what macro skill we're practicing when we're doing this, right? I'm just giving you the example of the exercises so you can see how they're practiced. But in a real lesson, in a real listening lesson, I would have a pre, I would have a post, I would have this whole thing to be able to build this for the while. And I would probably play the tape more than once. But because we're looking at the actual micro and macro skills, I'm not going through those motions. I'm just going to show you sort of what it looks like so that you can figure out what micro skills or macro skills you're practicing. So I hope you've written down the one that goes with this one because we're going to the next activity. All we're going to do is we're going to listen to the same listening that I just played, and you guys need to figure out what words or cues the speaker used to imply self-correction from the previous story. Here we go.
I was at home, I mean at a friend's house, and we were talking or playing video games really, when suddenly his father came down to the living room, the basement, it's not important. He came down to the basement and told us there had been an accident on the news. He said that a car had crashed into a building, a house, that's it, which was nearby. So we went upstairs to see the rest of the story. It was an idiot who was on drugs. Oh, no. He was drunk. We all sat there, amazed. Well, more like dumbfounded, seeing how dangerous stupid people can be.
Okay, so what were those words, the cues that the speaker used to imply self-correction? Pretty much said, no, oh, that's it, when he self-corrected. More like, so these cues within what the speaker was saying, right? Okay, so the question is, from the list, which are we practicing here? All right, write it down. And let's move on to the next activity. All right, so I'm gonna read some statements, and all you guys need to do is listen to the statements and identify each item if I'm doing a question or if I'm doing a statement. And you write Q if I'm doing a question and S if I'm doing a statement. So this is exercise number 5. Here we go. I'm gonna read these questions or statements. Here we go. Number 1, John is here. Number 2, it's time already? Number 3, you think I'm happy? Number 4, Mary is getting married. All right, that was pretty simple, right? So it was statement, question, question, statement. I could read those statements as questions or as statements. So the question now is, which micro or macro skill we're using here? Look at your list and pick one. And let's move on to the next activity. If you're still choosing, go ahead and pause. If not, here we go. When the audio is paused, predict what will be said next. That's all you need to do. I'm gonna play a little bit, I'm gonna pause, and I want you to predict what is going to happen.
Peter and the Dragon. Although he was only 10, he was a giant. He used to take kids' lunch money just by looking at them with his monster eyes. No one in the playground was safe. As he patrolled for his next victim, he saw the new boy. Peter was also 10. Unlike the bully, Peter was a tiny four-eyed frog that didn't see much of anything.
All right, I'm pausing the story there. Now I need you to predict what is going to happen next. All right, do you have an idea in your head? You don't need to write it down, but you have an idea in your head. You think what this story is going to be about, what's going to happen next. Okay, we're not going to look at that right now. Right now we're going to look at the list, and you guys need to pick which of the micro skills or the macro skills is being used here. We're going to stop right here, and then I'm coming back in the second video with the rest of the activities and the answers.